What if everything you admire in others, courage, discipline, clarity, peace, could be traced back to one thing, the people who shaped them? That's the quiet truth behind greatness. And today, we're diving into a text that rarely gets this personal, Meditations Book 1, where Marcus Aurelius, emperor and philosopher, does something extraordinary. He doesn't start with doctrine, debate, or dramatic battles. He begins with gratitude, but not just any gratitude, the kind that reveals how character is sculpted, not born, the kind that reminds us that the strongest version of ourselves is forged not in isolation, but in relationship. And that's what we've forgotten. You see, we're living in a time that celebrates the self-made man, the lone wolf, the personal brand. We're told to go it alone, blaze our own trail, cut off what doesn't serve us. But Marcus knew better. Even as emperor, he never claimed to be self-made. Instead, he credited dozens of people, teachers, friends, family, mentors, for every ounce of wisdom he carried. Book 1 is a roll call of influence, humility, and psychological roots. And if you read it right, it can change the way you look at your own past, your present behavior, and your potential future. Let's go deeper. Imagine a young man, heir to an empire, wrapped in power and privilege. That was Marcus. But instead of growing arrogant, he grew inward, toward virtue, toward restraint, toward service. And how? Because of the moral blueprint handed to him by others. He starts this book not with pride, but with a confession. Everything good in me, I learned from someone else. From his grandfather Varus, he learned how to govern his temper. From his father's memory, he drew modesty. From his mother, piety, simplicity, the kind of abstinence that guards your mind, not just your actions. These weren't abstract lessons. They were lived examples, and they left an imprint on him. Why does that matter to us? Because we're always being shaped, whether we admit it or not. And if we don't consciously choose our influences, we unconsciously inherit them. Some of us were lucky, like Marcus, to have noble guides. Others, not so much. But that doesn't mean we're stuck. What Marcus is showing us, quietly, humbly, is that gratitude isn't just a virtue. It's a lens, a tool for examining who we are and who we want to become. So let's pause. Ask yourself this: who taught you how to carry pain? Who showed you what dignity looks like under pressure? Who taught you silence in the face of gossip? Who taught you to rise early, work humbly, or tell the truth? And if your answer is no one, then the next question is this: who could? That's the power of Book 1. Marcus doesn't just list mentors, he dissects what he learned from each one. From Rusticus, he learned self-discipline and not to fall in love with his own image. From Diognetus, he learned to avoid superstition and show restraint. From Apollonius, he saw someone who bore the loss of a child with equanimity, an unshakable commitment to reason, even in grief. That's not just philosophy. That's living proof. And we need that proof. In a world that bombards us with content but starves us of character, we need real examples of composure, generosity, and strength. Not influencers, not sound bites, but human beings who actually lived it. That's what Marcus had, and that's what he offers us now. But it goes deeper than observation. Marcus took these impressions and embedded them. He studied them, practiced them, repeated them. He even notes, "From Rusticus, I learned to read carefully and not to be satisfied with a superficial understanding." That's a jab at lazy learning. Surface-level wisdom is decoration. Marcus wanted something else, transformation, and that takes work. We're not just talking about habits here. We're talking about the architecture of the soul, and every name Marcus mentions was like a brick laid in that architecture. Fronto, who taught him how envy poisons the spirit. Sextus, who modeled kindness without affectation. Alexander the grammarian, who taught him how to correct others without shaming them. Maximus, who showed him what true self-government looks like, calm, forgiving, unshaken by pleasure or pain. Each of these men became part of Marcus, and that's the heart of Book 1. We don't become virtuous alone. We absorb it through others, through watching, through failing, through being corrected, humbled and shaped. Now you might be thinking, but I didn't grow up with wise teachers. I didn't have a Rusticus or a Maximus. Fair, but that's the brilliance of this text. Marcus is giving you his mentors, his blueprint, his playbook. You can study them the same way he did. You can reverse engineer your own soul, because he wasn't writing this for anyone else. Meditations was his private journal. That means he was practicing, training, grading himself day by day. And if an emperor with the power of life and death still needed reminders, still struggled to live up to the virtues he admired, what does that say about us? It says we're not supposed to be perfect. We're supposed to practice, but practice what? Here's where Marcus leaves us clues. Again and again, he names the same traits: patience, gratitude, justice, rationality, humility. Not as flashy ideals, but as daily disciplines. He admires those who avoid flattery, who aren't swayed by novelty, who manage their health with moderation, who forgive quickly, who never pretend to be something they're not. In other words, people of depth, people of virtue. So the root cause of our modern suffering, the anxiety, the restlessness, the disconnection, isn't that we lack knowledge. It's that we lack examples, and when we don't have examples, we drift. Marcus is handing us those examples, not as commands, not as doctrine, but as a whispered list of thank yous that just happen to contain a blueprint for human excellence. And the best part, he never says, be like me. He says, here's who helped me. Here's how I changed. Here's what I saw. And in doing so, he shows us that virtue is contagious, that greatness is inherited not by blood, but by observation, by intention, by gratitude. So if you want to live better, don't start with goals. Start with examples. Find your Rusticus, your Maximus, and if they're not around you, find them in books, in biographies, in the lives of those who've walked before you, because your soul is being shaped, whether you like it or not. The only question is, by what? So how do we take all this ancient wisdom and actually live it? Let's be real. Most of us don't have a Stoic mentor on speed dial. We're not born into an imperial household surrounded by scholars, soldiers, and sages. But that's exactly why meditations matters, because it's not about circumstances, it's about choice. Marcus wasn't listing his blessings to brag. He was reminding himself of something critical. Character is a decision, and it begins with who you model. That's where your journey starts too. Step 1. Choose your lineage. You don't have to inherit greatness by blood. You can adopt it by attention. Marcus built a spiritual family tree, what we might call a philosophical lineage. He absorbed the best of each person, then held himself accountable to those examples. You can do the same. Who do you admire? Not for their wealth or fame, but for their clarity, discipline, truthfulness. Write their names down. Study them, whether they're historical figures, modern thinkers, or people you've met only once. Turn their lives into your curriculum. Ask, what would insert name do in this situation? How would they respond to anger, to success, to failure. What habits made them who they are? This isn't hero worship. It's strategic imitation. You're constructing a blueprint for your own soul, just like Marcus did. Step 2. Study examples, not theories. Stoicism often gets buried under terminology, logos, dichotomy of control, virtue ethics, but Marcus rarely uses jargon. Instead, he reflects on human behavior, how someone handled grief without collapsing, how another avoided flattery, how one man never faked emotions or changed with the crowd. That's the Stoic way, not to define courage, but to observe it. So if you want to grow in character, don't just read philosophy, watch it. Notice how wise people carry themselves. Read memoirs, reflect on your own life. Where have you already shown strength? Where are you still weak? Marcus praised those who didn't rush, who weren't easily provoked, who didn't pretend to know what they hadn't earned. Those aren't abstract ideas. They're behavioral choices. And every day, you're rehearsing a character, whether you know it or not. Step 3. Rehearse, reflect, refine. Marcus wrote meditations as a private exercise, not to impress, not to publish, to train. He was constantly reviewing. Who influenced me? What am I becoming? Where did I fail today? That's not just self-awareness. That's spiritual weightlifting. Do you do that? Try this. At the end of each day, ask yourself, what virtues did I practice today? Where did I fall short? Whose example did I follow or ignore? This daily autopsy isn't guilt-driven. It's growth-driven. You're not judging. You're refining. You're aligning your life with something higher than impulse. And don't aim for perfection. Marcus didn't. He confessed his failings, admitted when he let pride sneak in, when he resisted correction, when he forgot his training. But he kept coming back. That's what made him strong, not his birthright, but his return to principle. Now let's go even deeper, because the real power of Book 1 isn't just in the gratitude or the humility. It's in the framework of transformation Marcus lays out, one that anyone from any background can adopt. Let's break it down. Framework of the Stoic self. From influence to identity. Think of it like a 4-stage process. 1. Impression. You observe someone admirable. Maybe it's how they stay calm under stress or how they handle power with humility. 2. Internalization. You reflect on it. Why did that move you? What principle is behind that behavior? 3. Application. You try it. You resist gossip. You wake up early. You forgive someone. 4. Integration. Over time, it becomes natural, not because you're pretending, but because you've changed. The example has become part of you. Marcus went through this loop again and again. That's how he grew into a philosopher king. And it's how you grow into anything, not by declaration, but by practice. He even thanks his father for showing that a man can live in a palace without needing guards, gold, or glory. That's a lesson in non-attachment, in staying grounded, in remaining private within the public eye. You might not live in a palace, but you live in a world filled with distractions, ego traps, and the pressure to perform. Marcus is showing you how to walk through that world without being owned by it. Let's look at how 3 great thinkers took this exact approach and turned it into power. Marcus Aurelius. Strength through observation. Marcus didn't start out wise. He trained. Every example he studied became a layer of armor. From Rusticus, he learned how to stay humble. From Maximus, how to forgive. From Apollonius, how to endure grief without collapse. What's the takeaway? He didn't chase novelty or technique. He chased virtue, and he traced that virtue through real people. You can do the same. Epictetus, ownership through discipline. Epictetus was born a slave. He had no title, no wealth, no freedom, except the kind you can't take away. Inner freedom. He taught that the only thing truly yours is your mind, your choices. That's why he insisted on training the will every day. When Marcus read Epictetus's discourses passed down through Rusticus, it wasn't philosophy, it was fuel. A reminder that freedom isn't external. It's internal, and anyone can access it. You too. Napoleon Hill. Power through purpose. Jump forward 1700 years. Napoleon Hill studied the most successful men of his time. Not just their wealth, but their mindset. And what did he find? That success follows character. That definiteness of purpose, self-discipline, and faith in one's mission are non-negotiables. That's not far from Stoicism. In fact, it's the same path, different era. Where Marcus used philosophy, Hill used psychology. But the root is the same: discipline, clarity, purpose. So what does that mean for you right now? It means you don't need a new life. You need a new lens. One that sees your daily routines, your emotional responses, your moral compass as trainable. You can start with one influence, one example, one small act of restraint. And here's the secret. Once you start living this way, intentionally, reflectively, aligned with virtue, you'll start influencing others too. Without trying, without preaching. Just like Maximus, who never boasted but radiated trust, or Sextus, who never needed praise, yet earned everyone's respect. You'll become a quiet force, and that's what the world needs. Not louder voices, wiser ones, people who embody what others only post about. People who can absorb slander without crumbling, who forgive without needing to announce it, who wake up each day asking, "What kind of person am I becoming?" That's Stoicism in motion. That's Marcus's gift to you. And if you've watched this far, you're already on the path. So here's your next step. Right now, pause and make your lineage. List 3 people you want to model your life after. Historical or personal, alive or dead. Write what you admire about them, what they taught you, directly or indirectly. Then, pick one behavior you'll adopt from each of them this week. Something small, something daily. Maybe it's patience like your father, courage like Epictetus, simplicity like Marcus. Write it down, live it, and reflect. Because in a world full of noise, the clearest signal is a person of quiet strength. And the next time you feel lost or weak, don't ask, "What should I do?" Ask, "Who would I be if I lived like the people I admire?" That's the question that built an emperor. And it can build you too. Picture this. A man sits in a cold, dimly lit military outpost, far from the marble halls of Rome. His empire is fraying at the edges. Enemies press in from every side. The soldiers are tired. The plague has returned, and the weight of the known world rests on his shoulders. That man is Marcus Aurelius. But he's not giving orders. Not right now. He's writing, in his personal journal, what we now call meditations. He isn't talking about strategy, politics, or revenge. He's writing things like, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." He's reminding himself to be just, to be kind, to be rational, to be strong. That's not weakness. That's what it looks like to be unbreakable. Most of us think of philosophy as something you study when things are calm. But Marcus didn't have that luxury. He didn't get to retreat into peace. He had to practice Stoicism in war, in grief, in sickness, in betrayal. And somehow, through all of it, he held on to his soul. How? Because he'd been preparing. Every lesson from Rusticus, Maximus, and Apollonius wasn't just information, it was armor. Armor for moments like this. When everything around him crumbled, he didn't. Because he'd already built the habit of asking, "What is in my control?" And in that moment, surrounded by chaos, the only answer was his own mind. Can you imagine what that's like? To lose a child and still rule justly. To be betrayed by allies and still forgive. To watch your country suffer and still wake up early to serve it. This isn't fiction. This was Marcus's life. And it makes you wonder if someone with absolute power chose restraint, if someone in constant pain chose clarity, if someone who could have escaped hardship chose to meet it head-on. What excuse do we have? Marcus wasn't born perfect. He was angry, impatient, prone to sadness. He admits it, but he was willing to face it. And the proof is in Book 1. Think of how rare that is. A ruler writing not about conquest, but about gratitude. Not about his achievements, but about the people who made him better. That's a man who did the hard work of inner transformation. Now, here's a story you may not know. Toward the end of his life, Marcus was fighting the Marcomannic Wars. He was physically weak. His wife had died. He was aging, aching, and surrounded by death. During one campaign, stationed among the Quadi by the river Granua, he became gravely ill. The prognosis was uncertain. Some thought he would die. So what did he do? He opened his notebook, and he wrote, "Do not waste what remains of your life in speculating about others. Be like the rock against which the waves crash, but it stands firm." And perhaps most chillingly, he wrote this: "To live each day as though it were your last, without frenzy, without apathy, without pretense." This wasn't poetic reflection. It was real. He might not have lived to see the next sunrise, but instead of panic, he sought alignment. With nature, with virtue, with himself. Think about the strength that takes. Not to fight death, but to meet it with discipline. To say, even now, I can choose the right action. Most of us are never taught that kind of strength. We're taught to chase pleasure, avoid pain, look successful, and hope for the best. But Marcus didn't hope. He practiced. For decades. Until, even in his last breath, he could still say, "I lived according to nature." And that's what makes this more than a history lesson. It's a mirror. Because you and we don't need to rule an empire to feel overwhelmed, to lose people, to battle depression, to be betrayed. We've felt all those things, and Marcus stands across time to say, "You are not alone. The path has been walked. The tools exist, and they work, not just in theory, but in crisis." I want you to imagine your own Granua moment. A night when everything falls apart, when the pain is sharp, when the future is uncertain. What would you reach for? A distraction, a drink, a rant on social media, or would you reach inward? Would you open a notebook like Marcus did and write, not about what hurt you, but about what you still control? Would you remind yourself of who you want to be? That's the power of practiced virtue. That's the power of building a moral backbone before you need it. Because when life gets heavy, and it will, the only question that matters is, are you ready? Not ready to win. Ready to stay composed. Ready to respond with justice. Ready to face loss without becoming lost. Marcus was ready. And if a man surrounded by death, drained by war, and burdened by empire could meet each day with gratitude and grace, then so can we. Not perfectly, but faithfully. One breath at a time. One choice at a time. One journal entry at a time. Because when your life flashes before your eyes, you won't care about status, or followers, or likes. You'll care whether you lived with strength, whether you showed up, whether you grew, and in that final accounting, may we all be able to say, I tried, I practiced, I lived. Let's step back. You've just spent time in the mind of a man who ruled the Roman Empire and used that position not for indulgence or ego, but for inner refinement. A man who began his personal journal not with victories, but with gratitude, not with commands, but with humility. A man who shows us over and over again that greatness is not inherited, it is practiced. So let's bring it home. If we had to distill Book 1 of Meditations into just a few powerful takeaways, it would be these. Character is not random. It's shaped by the examples we absorb and the ones we choose to reject. Philosophy is a practice, not a performance. Marcus didn't write to impress. He wrote to train. Gratitude is a compass. By remembering who shaped him, Marcus anchored himself to what truly mattered: discipline, simplicity, justice, patience. Power does not exempt you from virtue. In fact, it demands more of it. Reflection is strength. To look inward, to review your actions, to correct yourself, to resist vanity, is the foundation of moral clarity. And finally, your influences matter. Choose them well, study them deeply, and live in a way that would honor their example. This is more than ancient wisdom. It's your map. Because no matter where you are right now, whether you're a student, a parent, a leader, or just someone trying to make sense of the chaos, you are building your soul, day by day, choice by choice. You don't need a throne. You don't need perfect mentors. You don't even need ideal conditions. What you need is to begin. Start building your own Book 1. Not a literal copy, but your own lineage of virtue. Write it out. Who shaped you? Who challenged you? Who taught you what not to become? Then, what will you do with that? Because Marcus didn't just list names. He held himself accountable to those names. That's the difference between nostalgia and transformation, between remembering and evolving. Here's a simple practice to carry this forward. At the start of each week, write down 3 virtues you want to embody. Not 10, just 3. Maybe it's patience like your grandfather, honesty like your best friend, resilience like that teacher who never gave up on you. Now, for 7 days, act accordingly, not perfectly, just consistently. At the end of each day, take 5 minutes to reflect. Did I live up to these today? Where did I drift? What will I correct tomorrow? Do this for a month. Watch what happens. Your emotions will stabilize. Your decisions will sharpen. Your self-respect will deepen. Not because life got easier, but because you got stronger. This is the essence of Stoicism, not to escape life, but to enter it more fully, more calmly, and more wisely. Marcus shows us what that looks like. In the palace, in the battlefield, in sickness, in loss, in silence. He stayed the course, not because he was divine, but because he practiced. So let this video be your starting point, not your finish line. Don't just admire Marcus. Imitate him. You don't need permission. You don't need a title. You need a pen, a clear mind, and the courage to begin. Now, here's your final prompt. Sometime today, before your head hits the pillow, sit down and write your own version of Book 1. It could be 3 sentences or 3 pages. Doesn't matter. List the people who shaped you. Describe what they taught you, directly or indirectly. And then ask yourself, am I honoring what they gave me? If the answer is yes, double down. If the answer is no, begin again. And if no one comes to mind, then Marcus's teachers are now yours. Rusticus, Maximus, Apollonius, and the rest. Their example is now available to you. Study them, practice them, build on them, Because we don't just inherit wisdom, we pass it on. And now, a look ahead. You've now seen how Marcus laid the foundation of his soul through influence, gratitude, and reflection. But Book 1 was just the prologue. There's something deeper coming. In Book 2, Marcus faces a new enemy. Not people, not politics, not even grief. He faces the day itself, with all its chaos, complaints, and temptations. And he opens with this bombshell. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. Wait, what? After all that wisdom and calm? Yes, because Marcus knew. Gratitude builds your foundation, but discipline is what gets you through the day. So in the next episode, we'll walk through Book 2. We'll learn how to start the day with strength, how to resist irritation, how to turn obstacles into fuel, and how to hold on to clarity, even when surrounded by chaos. Because gratitude is where we start, but virtue is where we live. See you in the next one.